Hey guys, how's it going? So this is essentially a part two to the last video I made, which I've now turned into a part one, obviously, on being a pagan in distant lands. Essentially being a pagan in a land far from where your ancestors are actually come from. Um this video, what I'm going to do is probably bring it a little closer to home, tell you more about what I personally believe and how I make it work. Doesn't mean, obviously, I'm telling you that that's what you got to believe. But it doesn't also mean just because you don't believe it, there's not something you can't get out of it. As a recap to the last video, essentially, what I said I believe is that um, one of the reasons I think paganism has so much credibility is the very fact it's the first religion of humans all across the world. I do believe at the core of all systems of paganism, they're very similar. Um, And I do believe that there is a blood connection between, say, races or groups of people and the land that they existed in for thousands and thousands of years. And that goes, all indigenous people across the world, including, say, Europeans in Europe as well. You are the indigenous people of your land. Um, but to caveat that, um, I what I said was that because paganism at its core is a symbiosis between yourself, your race or tribe, and the land itself, it will work anywhere, because that symbiosis will continue anywhere and everywhere. Obviously, there will be places where you just feel out of place. If you've spent your entire life in Europe, I would guess it would be quite hard to get to that same spot. You'll probably get to in the forests, um, in the middle of the desert or on a glacier in Antarctica or something like that. Um, But things start getting complicated when, say, you've been born in a place as well. So, my ancestors' blood memory is obviously of the UK, England, Leeds, Warwick area, I believe specifically. Um, but I was born in Australia. I was born right, I'm in Brisbane now. Um, and this is my home as much as anybody who anybody else who lives in Australia, probably more than some. um so yeah, but what I said was, when groups of people, so 200 years ago, the British invaded Australia, and they've come in, and Australia has never been the same since. Some may say it's better, some may say it's worse, but it's different, and there's no going back. So it is what it is. Um, and in those 200 years, the land, Australia itself, has worked its magic on the British that came. Obviously, I'm actually just first generation British, but I'm as probably as Australian as anybody, as someone who could trace their lineage all the way back to, say, convict era in the First Fleet. Um, so yeah, anyway, that's main recap of the last video. Um, And like I said, this one is essentially how I get it all to work for me. Um, First off the bat, why is that important? Um, and the main reason it's important is, I don't know, at its heart, I'm a logical person. I'm not just going to take someone's word on anything, whether it's a real, you know, material world thing, philosophical issue, something to do with the occult, you know. Obviously, once we kind of move into occult realms, you're not going to get peer reviewed studies backing things up or anything like that. But at the same time, I think it needs to make sense, you know, like an example would be, say, the whole Wicca, you know, if you do harm to someone, it'll come back to you 3 times 3, you know, 3 times is worse or something, by the power of 3 times 3 or some bullshit like that. Why 3? Why does it actually come back? You know, these are questions these people can't tell you. They're just parroting what somebody else has told them, and they've never given any deep thought into why it is. But yeah, for me to fully throw my heart into something, I need it needs to make sense to me. I need to, you know, maybe not fully believe that this is the way and the only way, but I think for a lot of things in the world, it doesn't even have to matter. But what does have to matter is that you believe it is, especially when it comes to magic. You know, someone can believe their system is magic, you know, that whatever particular system of magic they follow is the strongest. And someone else will obviously think the same thing. It's the same with religion. Um, I don't really care either way. What matters is, to me, the fact is, if they both work, then there's something in each of them that makes, you know, there's a commonality in each of them that if you can understand that, you can build upon that and do your own stuff that will work for you in whatever land you find yourself to be in. So, the easiest way to do that, of course, is to bring everything back to basics. I actually studied anthropology at university, and one of the subjects I excelled in was comparative mythology. And that's fascinating itself, because what it essentially does is take myths, identify the key actors and the actions all in that story, brings them down to your pure archetypal basics. So Loki would be obviously the trickster, and the trickster is also a character found in, say, Native American mythology in the form of coyote, at least for many of them. Things like that. And then obviously there's a action between the two characters. And you can take a myth and write it out like a mathematical equation. And I'm sure at least 75% of you going, well, there goes that myth. You know, there goes everything that makes that myth worth listening. You know, beautiful and imaginative and emotive and, you know, special to these people in this place. And you're right. But knowing that can be done and seeing what it's at its core will, you know, that will teach you things in itself, and it doesn't necessarily have to take away all that other stuff, because you can go back to that later. But knowing at its heart, say there's a story, the trickster, and it has this lesson, um, that's what kind of helps me make it work. So I see, say, pagan gods, the pantheons of various pagan systems. I see them as just pure archetypes. I see them as lenses of force through that colors magical energy and other things, too, because obviously with belief systems, it's even paganism, it's not just about magic, and in fact, most of them it isn't at all. Um, but um, but yeah, and I see the gods themselves, you know, almost sort of performing, and now remove all negative thoughts you may have about Christianity for the moment. But in Christianity, Jesus plays a bridging role between God, the Father, the unknowable force, the source, the universe, and us. And here's Jesus. That's the same role that I see the pantheons in paganism play. They're the bridging things that help us understand and work with the unknowable. So for me, breaking things down to that level really helps. And then you can add your own little twists to it. So if you're doing magical workings, you can, I'm a big fan of folk magic. Um, I've been studying that, little spells, knots in a piece of red string, all that black pennies since I was a kid. And you can take what you know at the raw form and then add your little things to it. If you say wanted to do a spell or a working or just a ritual in celebration of nature or whatever it is. Now, I went through, as a child and as a teenager, um, always fascinated by magic and the occult. Hit my 20s. I've actually got a science degree as well. So I became very sciencey, but I never lost my kind of my spirituality. So I kind of embrace the belief system of pantheism, and I think at the core of paganism, you'll find a very strong pantheistic element. I mean, pantheism's a good kind of thing because it's so damn broad. You can slot just about anything in it. Fully agrees with science, which works for me, but allows for just about anything more. Essentially at its core, pantheism is just God is everything and is through everything. And there's obviously people break it down into more complex things, but I think that's sort of adding unnecessary complexity, for the sake of just being philosophical. And that's essentially how I do it. So I don't have a single kind of pagan pantheon that I would follow. Like, there's, the Aboriginal myths and stories. I love them. I learn from them. But I'm not Aboriginal at all. And all the European stuff, especially the UK stuff, I love, because obviously there's a resonance there with me. But it's almost like a distant dream now. And you look outside my windows here, which The only reason I'm not out there and in my car is because I'm a little too close to a road and the traffic noise would get annoying. Um, but that's how it works. You kind of bring it back to the basics and then build your own framework, magical framework, belief framework on top of that. In terms of the land itself, one of the things that, like I said, has always made me jealous about you guys in Europe is you can go out there and you've got these stone circles and dolmens and whatever, and you can look at that and think someone in my family built that 3,000 years ago. And I don't have that. Like I said in the last video, there's an 80,000 year gap between anything my ancestors did in Australia. I mean, between my ancestors and the people who call, the indigenous people of Australia. So it's as wide a disconnect as you can actually literally get humanly possible. But at its real root core, sorry, at the root of it all, you'll find common pagan beliefs. In terms of navigating the landscape around me, the good thing about where the position I'm in is I don't have a lot of preconceived stories and ideas. So discovering, the magic of the landscape in a pagan sense itself is a lot more intuitive. Obviously, for me, local Aboriginal legends will provide a lot of clues, especially depending on, the good, positive, negative, what happened there. It can tell you what kind of energy that place has. There's a mountain very close to me that I have a weird connection with that I'll tell you about one day. And that is a sacred Aboriginal site that they used to trek to every year. It's got caves in it that have healing properties. So obviously this place, while that's as much as I'll ever know, I think, because even the Aborigines that are left here in Brisbane, they're very disconnected to all of this as well, and they've lost, all these sites. But also on the side of that hill, there used to be what they know as a Bora ring, which is essentially like a magic circle where ceremonies and rituals are performed. So that's clues. You just walking out, what catches your eye? What feeling do I get when I'm in this place? When you're alone in the wilderness, let your intuition guide you. There's a absolutely magical spot I try and get to often, and I don't get there nearly enough, that my friends and I discovered back when we were 18. We were out we were actually out in the bush trying to find somewhere to have a little smoko, and we just wandered and something drew us to this valley, and that valley happened to have some cliffs, and there was this big flat place totally full of weeds, nasty weeds with spikes, and all of us were like, this is so cool. But logically, it was the stupidest place out there because it was full of the spiky weeds. But we cleared it all, and I still go there all the time. And I know I've done dowsing work, that's another thing. So through this place, I believe there's a junction of two ley lines. I actually got quite good at dowsing, and that's another thing. You can do map dowsing as well if you're really keen. I'm not an expert dowser. I've done it a few times. It worked way better than I expected. I did it kind of with the two metal rods that I made myself out of bonsai wire, actually. Um, and I discovered pipes in my backyard and quite a few interesting things. But I believe I discovered two ley lines running through this spot as well. Okay, things are kind of getting on, so I'll try and wrap this up. In terms of magic, like I think I touched on in my last video, magic in the southern hemisphere doesn't quite work either. Everything's anti-clockwise. The seasons are all back to front. Christmas is hot. Halloween's in bloody spring. Easter's in autumn. Winter's in the middle of the year. All of the pagan festivals, Samhain, all of that, I don't even know them because it's meaningless to me here. You know, what way do you turn in a ritual when you're doing, not that I do spells and rituals much these days, but if I'm turning if something says turn anti-clockwise, do I turn anti-clockwise because the sun's going the wrong way? Basic things like that. I can't go out and gather oak berries and what are they, acorns and elderberries and hawthorn and all the traditional hazel ones and that. I've got eucalypts, I've got beech trees, ironbarks, totally different things, and none of them. I mean, even the Aborigines, they do have a lot of healing plants, but there's not a strong plant folklore. So if you wanted to, I mean, if I ever do stuff, I do like a bit of burning, smoldering the leaves. I'm not a kind of white sage purify kind of guy, but atmosphere I think is very important for all magical work, all workings. And what do you use? And I say it's the same with paganism. Find out. I mean, with magic, like with my beliefs in paganism, I've taken it all the way back to the basics, to the point. I actually think I even know what magic is, and how I haven't worked out quite how it works, so I'm still getting there. But I mean, I think magic itself is life. That's what magic is. It's the same thing as you. It's exactly the same as your soul. That's what I think magic is at its core. So I've taken that belief, and look, even if you don't believe that, it doesn't mean you can't use this and build on it as something that works too. There's a lot of things in my mind that I kind of hold as maybe they're true, maybe they're not. I'll never know, but it works. And that's the key here. We don't know anything for sure in life, but what really matters is what gets results. So if you find something that works for you, that's all you need to know. But yeah, so I mean, a little mundane example is with the what way do I turn if ever I wanted to do something. I'll still turn anti-clock. I'll still turn clockwise. You know, sunwise, which isn't sunwise down here. And the reason I'll do that is because it's so like that in the psyche of everybody and in every spell that it's far easier for me to think, okay, the sun's going backwards. So instead of thinking, okay, I'm going against the sun, I just think to myself, I'm going with the earth. And so I see the sun going past if I'm doing some sort of circular thing. And that means moving forwards to me. And that's how I get something that simple to work. If I find other things like that, actually, starting to get off track, and this video is getting way too long. But that's the key to it all. I bring it back to basics, and I'll do it in a way that I think a lot of people won't like, because I think they will, and I'll probably get into that more in my later videos, but I like to strip things back, but the purpose of doing that is so that you can put back on it, or I can put back on it my own meaning, and what's special to me, what I find may work through older systems, and what I guess might work through my own intuition. And that's about it. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope you have a fantastic day.